All right, guys, Anthony here again with Awesome Terrible Weapons Guild. Still shooting in Vigilante, our new home away from home. Today we're talking about some introduction concepts to Rapier. Full up front, I'm not the greatest at Rapier. I'm hoping to change that soon. I'll be in the next few weeks recording, then trying to release on Wednesday nights a bunch of Rapier videos going through Fabrice, the art of defense, and kind of make a very thorough approach, application study of it, kind of cover to cover, front to back. I have gone through a handful of plays. I'm more familiar with the second half of the book than the first half of the book, which is reasons we'll probably get into next week. Today is going to be a little bit about basics of stance, position, structure, distance, probably dipping a bit into ideas of tempos, how things move, how things should move, at least according to Fabrice. And kind of working from there. Again, with these kind of videos, the first one or two, I'm not using a rapier just because I think this is something that you can be doing with anything. And I want to emphasize that if you've got PVC pipe lying around, if you've got a longsword lying around, which everyone does, right? Or if you're just working with a broomstick, this is stuff you can start practicing if you want to get into HEMA. You don't need all these big, fancy, expensive weapons. You can just grab some PVC pipe or a stick or whatever you have and start working the concepts, working the principles until you can get something in. So again, starting off with Rapier from Fabrice. I'll demonstrate first with the PVC pipe, a little bit easier, a little bit more available. So Fabrice, the basics of stance, everyone really associates Fabrice with these very almost exaggerated, ridiculous looking positions where someone's kind of bent over, they're on the ground, their hands here, they're up like this, and kind of in this ridiculous, almost contortionist looking pose. And I've worked with some people who are fairly flexible and told them, like, yeah, just model this position and try to make that happen. And if you don't, it's not a static position, right? It's not something like, we're just going to hold this for the next 2 minutes as a isometric work. And maybe that'd be useful, maybe that'd be great, but that's not where this comes from. Fabrice does make a point of being obnoxious and pretentious and arrogant, saying like, yeah, these are real positions. These are how these things are displayed on purpose. You should hold these positions. Otherwise, don't waste your time on a sword fight. It's kind of his thumb in your nose at real people. Different time, different lifestyle, right? If you have time, we all have time now, and the ability to work that way, great. Otherwise, think of those as goals, think of those as endpoints. Will your rapier fencing be as effective if you can't get down there? Probably not. Is it going to make or break your ability to enjoy doing HEMA and learning sword fighting? No, not at all. So, with that in mind, we see these really ridiculous, almost exaggerated looking positions where we're really extended down here like this. And the important thing to remember is that these are obviously moments captured in time, but also they're endpoints. They're not, we don't start down here the whole time and kind of like crawl forward, right? I'm a firm believer of I move forward and then I'm in that position and then I'm back out of that position as I'm doing something else. So I'm going to have bounce around between book one, book two as we kind of go through these. Don't worry too much about it. We'll come to that. I said I'll have some videos coming out hopefully middle of next month to take the place of this night where it's just straight up produced fancy drawings or videos of people going through things. But with that said, what we're looking for right now is Fabrice is really big on his idea of just a walking stance, right? We want to be able to walk down the street. And this is kind of the basics of everything coming down from everything, where I'm just moving along. My stance is very narrow. I'm able to stay light on my feet, stay mobile. I'm not taking these big lunges, which set me almost, I don't want to say overextended, but you find yourself almost stuck more when you make these big long lunges. You really can't aggress forward if you need to. So really thinking about with Fabrice, as you're applying these, being able to just walk. Just like you're walking down the street, having to be carrying a sword, having to be stabbing the person across from you. One of the other really important things that I think is important to highlight early on is how Fabrice A likes to attack and B defines his distances. So for Fabrice, distance is there's short and long, and very simple. I've carried this back through to certain buckler videos we've seen before. Talked a little bit more in longsword, but a little bit less clean there because it doesn't transfer as nicely. But for Fabrice, if I can hit the other person purely by leaning my body forward, this is close distance, right? So I'm here, my sword is up, I'm presented, I'm ready to attack. If I want to hit them, I don't step, I don't punch out with the sword or anything else, I just lean forward. And this lean, that's kind of how I think of Fabrice's thrust. From here, all I'm going out is forward, and I get to drive through and hit the other guy. If I'm one step further away, this is long distance, where I can't hit with a lean, no matter how hard I try. Well, maybe I can with the reach I have. Let me choke up. Right, so I can't hit with this lean. I have to take a step and then lean. So this is his long distance. And this is where a lot of his plays and things start up from. Possibly they'll start, let's shade out of frame, an extra step back. So I'm out of distance altogether. I take a step, I'm in long distance, I can't hit with that lean. I take another step, and I can hit with the lean. And that distance work is really important. That idea of how do I attack, how do I move through things with Fabrice is really important as well. This baseline fundamentals ties into how Fabrice describes his idea of timing. He breaks things down into tempo and tempi, and we'll deal with that more later. The important thing to think about when we're trying to understand what Fabrice is saying is that everything can be done in one tempi. The amount of actions you get to do in that tempi is limited. So I can't take a step in one tempo. However, in one tempo, I can pick up my foot. It's another tempo to put it down, pick up my foot, put it down. So our feet moving up and down is one action. He's not going to say your feet are slower. He just says your feet can get less done than your hands can. Anything with your hand is an action. He doesn't really talk about the torso lean being an action, but that's going to be one action as well. So the important thing, especially looking at hands and feet, is where people like to isolate things. If I pick up my foot, that's an action. If I put my foot down and reach with my arm, that's another action. So being able to understand and isolate how this works, how this plays through, will be very helpful in the following videos. Just being aware that footwork is time, picking up, and setting down. Anything you do with your hands, whether it's straight, whether it's the dip, the Cavazione, whether it's a turn and lean, right? Those are all single actions or single tempos. And that's kind of the crux of the starting point of all that information. One of the other last important things I'll talk about first doing some worthwhile drill stuff is his opposition to, quote, flinging the sword, right? So Fabrice is known, at least I think, for holding the sword out in front of you, right? If you look at the second book of How to Approach, rule 1 says I go like this and I just walk at the other guy until they get hit. He wants you to start with your sword out. And that's a vast oversimplification in a lot of ways. But the important thing is that he doesn't want you to fling your sword. You don't want to start with your arm tucked. And if I'm in distance, I fling out to strike. He wants the sword out. You close the distance and then lean to strike. So that's a big and crucial difference to understand getting into Fabrice's rapier, is that we're not going to sit in this kind of crouch position throwing thrusts like this. Fabrice wants you here. And if you're going to thrust, you lean, right? With a step, with motion, anything like that. The important thing, starting off, because by the end we'll start changing this again like we do with everything, is that we want to lean to attack, and with that in mind, we're keeping this arm straight. So going to that, I'm going to grab the longsword because it's got edges, it's got a cross, you can see a little bit better as we talk about things. You can do this just as well with a dowel or stick or whatever you've been working with, but this is going to help highlight what our positions are. Fabrice has 4 primary guards, and it's really simple. So first guard, think of having the long edge, your fingers up. Second, you rotate 90 degrees. Third is down. Fourth is out, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. These are important. We'll start doing some drill work, some pel work in a moment, but I'm not going to obsess on this. Again, I'll have videos coming out in the next few weeks, getting into more details. If you want to see more detail on guards, skip ahead a few videos, check back later, depending on where you are in time. Other important things, though, about actually holding the rapier. And longsword, I'm going to slide up the camera real quick. I'm very strict about this idea of having this wrist not be broken, this angle here, this connection here, because a longsword is used for cutting, right? We want to throw the sword up, pull it down, and we can't do that without that angle here. However, it's a rapier. Rapiers, Fabrice says that the best rapier fencer, or the best cutter, who's best at throwing cuts with the rapier, will always be defeated by someone who's really good at throwing thrust with the rapier, just because a thrust will close lines faster, and it's a direct line attack, it's a straight attack, and it's a much easier way and more efficient way of doing things, which doesn't mean you should never cut. It just means that given the option, a thrust is, quote, always going to be better. So with that in mind, we don't want to hold the rapier with this angle. We want to kind of let this break forward a little bit. We'll let this slide through down. And honestly, if this was a real rapier, I'd be kind of gripping the pommel like that, right? This lets us support the sword up our entire arm, lets our lats activate and come into play. And even though it's a long sword, I still have a lot of control to drive through here. However, with the rapier, much shorter handle, you want your finger over the cross a little bit because you've got your complex hilt and everything. We'll go over this again next week with the actual rapiers, but I really want to highlight how we should be holding, how we should be working on these things as we're coming through. So first, drills to work on. If you have a pel or a target, this is the time to be setting them, hitting them. If you have some you're suspending from the ceiling, that's great. I wouldn't hit your walls just because I don't want to be responsible for damaging your walls. But first things to get used to is just a simple thrust, right? So we talked about it. I start in position. I make sure I'm at that long distance where I can lean for my thrust. I'll even back up a little bit more. So I'm here, just getting used to thrust, right? So I find it easiest starting in third. So again, third again, the long edge is down, the point is down. If you have a round thing, don't worry about it. Let your knuckles point down. And the nice, easy thing about learning rapier is if we're going to assume this is another attack coming in, you want to turn your long edge into it. So first drill, just starting nice and easy, nice, relaxed, whatever weapon simulator thing you have. I'm going to lean forward. And as I lean forward, I'm going to turn my long edge, turning out into second, into the other weapon. If I'm on the other side, same thing. Start in third, long edge into fourth, as I lean in. They're just really simple, getting used to leaning, driving, moving as you come through. So notice at the moment, I'm not changing sides. I'm not starting on the outside, coming in, just really simple, starting distance, lean, distance, lean. I promise if you're following along, do reps of this. It's a lot of work. It really focuses on structure, stance, core stability, which is going to be really important as we dive deeper into these lessons and understandings. The other thing that's worth noting is I always make fun of Fabrice because the offhand is kind of always up here. And I joke about being like a jaunty sailor, like, right, he's here, he's like this. I want to flail, do something. This is actually really important. This is getting your shoulder and your opposite lat to activate. And you can feel the difference here, where if you're just holding something out like this and letting this arm be relaxed, you can feel half of your back, hopefully, is working. The other half isn't. As you pull this up, your full back gets engaged and it helps distribute the weight from this arm to your entire core. So this is really important in this position. So as you're going through this drill, really work on keeping this hand up and driving through. Last thing talking about for tonight is going to be into that Cavazione, that idea of this changing sides. And this is really important. Again, this is critical as we go into the actual plays and we start playing with this more, is that you should never Cavazione static, right? I haven't moved, I haven't leaned, I haven't attacked, I haven't stepped, right? This is just me wasting time because I haven't taken advantage of the fact that my opponent is stationary and giving me an opening to this side. Whenever you Cavazione, every time, according to Fabrice, is that I'm here, as I'm doing this, I should be driving in, right? And how much you drive in, let that impact how you move things. So I'm one side of my weapon, of the opponent's weapon, I'm gonna drop, and this motion is coming from the wrist. I'm going to turn back out into third to press their weapon away, and I'm going to lean. And all that needs to be happening in the same moment, in the same tempo. I'm not here, third, lean. This is very much through. And that's one of the most difficult things to internalize when you're going through Rapier, when you're learning Rapier. Let me try it again with the stick option. So you can kind of see, right, lettering is out. As I come down, I'm turning, it goes away. And just making sure as you're doing this, you're able to drive through that lean. If you're doing this from the other side, so I'm starting on the inside, I Cavazione, come across, same thing's gonna happen, right? I start in third, edge down, I drop, I start to lean in. As I do so, I turn my edge towards their weapon and drive through. Drop and drive through. So this is gonna be enough for tonight. Some really simple drills to start things off. If you've never done any kind of Rapier, these are the kind of starting points that are going to make the rest of the classes you take and do, whether you're just following along with me or doing them somewhere else, really useful. Just getting this idea of how do I move, what should my stance be in, making sure that you're not in these really long extended stances, at least not for Fabrice. Other schools, other styles will teach that, will encourage that for their lunges. But looking at Fabrice is we want that arm straight. We're not going to fling that sword. We're looking for both arms engaged, thing that offhand being up by the face. This is for active defense, absolutely, but it's also, as I said, to engage your back, helping pick up that weapon, keeping yourself in structure, in form, in support. Right? Rapier is supposed to be fancy, just little pokes and tabs, but it doesn't mean you're not going to wrestle, because in a street duel, you do what you need to do. So, just had a couple quick drills, just working that thrust, working the Cavazione with the thrust from both sides. I can't really do this on my pal, but you can also Cavazione over, because if they're straight lines, maybe I can get this modified in time for next week. We'll see. No promises, probably not. But that's a starting point for Rapier and Fabrice. Again, I'll be doing another live one next week, and then either the week after that, hoping to do those actual polished videos, working through the art of combat. So thank you very much, guys. Have a great night, and we'll be back on Friday with some more longsword.